It occurs to me that there is a large and critical gap in fantasy creature lore, and it's not only a needless problem, it's also partially my fault. There just are not enough harmless, passive, non-monstrous, and even beneficial creatures represented in fantasy gaming sourcebooks and bestiaries. It's kind of understandable that we naturally focus on creatures that pose challenges and threats to player characters, and often just shove the less dangerous critters into the back of the book with some footnotes on lore and ecology, but it does give a very lopsided impression of what fantasy worlds can be like. If you look at fantasy settings like the Pokemon world, there are larger populations of the peaceful herd Pokemon and a more realistic representation of the predatory types being fairly rare, and the same must be true for any fantasy world really. Now, our first knee-jerk instinct when considering non-predatory creatures is that they would have a limited focus in the game anyway, but that's just not true. Let me give you an example. In the Avatar world setting, Appa is the last of the sky bison, which are large, six-legged mammal-like creatures that can fly. Appa has thick, itchy white fur he sheds at the end of each winter and has a brown arrow marking on his head. He doesn't speak but demonstrates fairly high animal intelligence, clearly forms strong bonds with those who are kind to him, and has a great aversion to fire and going into confined spaces. As flying creatures, air bison have forward-facing eyes, unlike ground-based herd animals, as they require more precise distance measurements in their movements. Appa is present in most of the episodes of the Airbender series, and he is a lifelong companion of Aang the Avatar. Animal companions and familiars have become more and more popular in fantasy tabletop and streaming gaming, and I don't see that trend ending anytime soon. So there is always a need for more creatures that can fill that role, great and small. Dungeon delving, adventuring in the confines of buildings and crowded city streets, or thick forests, jungles and swamps also makes animal mounts a real pain in the ass to keep track of as well. So there is a huge need for fantasy creatures that can fill the dual role of both a sneaky pint-sized animal familiar and a large, tough animal mount. I have a few simple ideas for how we can do this, and I'm just going to spitball them and hurl them at you. You can do all the hard work consulting your chosen rules system to give the creature game statistics. First off, how about a creature that is some form of cephalopod, like a dark mantle, octopus, taco, or similar, except it operates perfectly well on the land, in the water, and even in the air. How it does this is that it has 8 to 10 long and flexible limbs. Between those limbs is a thin but strong membrane, and by using a special chemical reaction from some glands, it can seal the tentacles together and fill the membrane with lighter than air gas and float like a hot air balloon, using pores with jet stream pore nozzles so it can direct its movements in the air and also boost its movement underwater quite a lot. When not inflated, it's not a very large creature at all, ambling around very nimbly and either flat and slithering up or up on the tips of its tentacles so its large eyes get a better view. To ride the creature, the character can either clamber on top of the inflated sphere or hang beneath it. It can use its tentacles to latch onto something and slingshot from one position to another quickly in combat, and perhaps use directed blasts of its rapid inflation gas chemicals to create deafening sounds, even concussive shocks, or strong jets of gas that may even be flammable. Cephalopods are generally quite intelligent creatures, and many can alter their skin pigments and texture to blend in with their environment in an uncanny way. So there is a lot of room there for tons of variation, with the more adaptable and feature-packed breeds being the most sought after, rare, and expensive. Finding creatures like that may require travel into some of the most gnarly terrain and remote, deadly areas you can find. Tropical death-trap jungles with mobile vines, venomous reptiles, all kinds of nasty insects and elusive, violent prey animals such as razor-tusked boars and vorpal sloths are where you find the most adaptable all-terrain survivors like the decapus and dark mantles. A great location to discover lost ruins of ancient civilizations swallowed up by a riot of nature. Speaking of insects, a swarm is also an excellent solution to the problem of finding creatures that can be very small and versatile and potentially large enough to be a mount. I wonder how many giant murder hornets would it take to actually lift an adult human off the ground and carry them as they fly? Quite a few, no doubt, but that's the general idea. It may even be that the hive structure they live in is actually airborne all the time. They can build it on the wing with lightweight paper and wax, then just fly around with it held in the swarm, protecting the queen and the newborn members of the swarm. Magic is great. Any creature can just be artificially or innately enchanted to grow in size when required to serve as a mount. The extreme side of this is the figurines of wondrous power, well, not a living creature, which are little carved creature sculpts that transform and summon some sort of astral entity that takes the physical form of the animal the figurine looks like. But a figurine of astounding power could have more than one mode. It might be used to summon a normal tiny creature, or summon a giant riding animal mount, or giant attack version of the same creature. How about a figurine of legendary power that is like a mothership that houses many other figurines inside itself, like a Russian nesting doll? Or you can activate its battle form and your diamond wasp could go from a tiny to formidably large and rideable mount, or a true tank of a thing that has hundreds of compartments in its body that eject and activate less powerful wasp figurines like an aircraft carrier or drone control carrier launching wings of fighter craft. Clockwork Horrors would be an excellent candidate for that sort of mayhem. Absolute madness. Or we could get back to more examples of super adaptable creatures later on. It's a good subject for any sort of video. Still, another aspect of the non-monstrous side of exotic creatures are things that can be harvested, farmed, or exploited for food. Materials like leather, bones, scales, and so on. Perhaps they have medical uses, or maybe the creatures are just perfectly suited for saving on humanoid labor. Not all creatures can be ridden like a horse, but many more can be hitched to a vehicle to tow it around. Large creatures like elephants are as good as heavy machines when it comes to their ability to push over a tree, carry large loads, and they may have been used as platforms in warfare, kind of like living tanks. Any setting that's got large creatures like dinosaurs or even marine mammals can be used like that. It's surprising that we haven't used whales for towing fishing nets, for instance. Textiles from wool, fur, and hair can be used, as can sinews to form lashings and bitings, leather of course, but also things like dye stuffs. For example, the rich purple harvested from sea snails. Alchemists and druids alike may keep populations of very fast reproducing species for use in their studies and practices, from the humble fruit fly to something as exotic as the mogwai, which I mentioned in a recent video, the creatures that reproduce when exposed to water. If you want to get really funky in your world building, there's always necromancy. Sure, raising zombies makes for a great, tireless, and near inexhaustible labor force, but have you considered that things like poltergeists and ghosts can be used for remote operating drone machines or espionage? A trained ghost loyal to an organization that rides around in the bodies of enemies, gaining access to all their secrets, disrupting activities, or even assassinating pivotal targets? It would be highly effective, and just the sort of thing a sanctioned branch of necromancy schools could do for the governing bodies of whatever city they're located in. But I'm kind of getting away from the point there. Some exotic animals may be deliberately caught and moved to new environments just for the sport of hunting them. And you need look no further than mimics and displacer beasts for that sort of thing, which is really horrible news for the mimics, as there's always a good chance that they will be an intelligent creature that can speak, a fact so often overlooked in their lore. Any creature that consumes exotic and valuable material can be exploited for industrial purposes. So the gold-eating Oramvorax, the mineral and gem-consuming Zorn, the metal-hungry Manticore, the metal-corroding rust monster, all of those can be kept and bred to the point where they become domesticated species. Can you picture a domesticated Manticore? Any culture can develop a religious and spiritual belief that place unusual importance on any kind of species of animal. So if we look at how cows or rats or monkeys are treated in some places on Earth, imagine if it were myconids or Galeb-Duer boulderfolk or chewingas or something horrific like rot grubs. Just one little thing like that can make a whole city, an entire culture, a country, a very memorable and notable place in your games. Like, hey, welcome to the island of Hyrix, where the people consider the Kuo-toa a sacred species. And why not? Kuo-toa are known to be so obsessively fanatical in their strange religions that they can literally manifest their own gods. There could be massive benefits to forming a stable, symbiotic relationship with a species like that. But can you imagine what impact that would have on some humanoid culture that did it? It goes both ways. So the ways of the Kuo-toa may rub off on that other humanoid culture, a very uncomfortable and confronting problem for any foreign explorers and adventurers who encounter them for the first time. Anyway, it's all food for thought and a great mental space to play in. Don't forget, along with being cute or creepy, animal familiars and companions can be highly practical and beneficial to player characters and non-player characters. They don't have to remain the same size all the time. They may be a modified version of a wild and dangerous exotic monster species. They may have been or are currently controlled and transformed by some sort of technology or enchantment. And you really can alter the entire cultural landscape of your games by making better use of just a few exotic species in the mainstream. In fantasy games, a weird cult could be the state religion of a whole nation. The only limits are your imagination, and that has no limits at all. My name is AJ Pickett. Thanks for listening. Check my channel for narrated adventures, short stories, and tons of monster lore. As always, I'll be back with more for you very soon.